that can be really observed. So now we have patterns. That's our patterns. That's our roundabouts and exit patterns and intersection patterns. That's our pattern blue, pattern red, and pattern green in EAM. And now we need evaluation. Now some politician has to create a rule. Do we want to speed up traffic or do we want to slow down traffic? And then we can propose the appropriate means. So now we need evaluation, which is basically not too much our job as researchers, because we should be able, as construction people, to cater to all the evaluations. If the idea is to slow down traffic, we can provide the right means. If the idea is to speed up traffic, we can also provide the right means. So if we want to cater to big transformation projects in the company, we should provide the right way of doing EAM. If we want to consolidate and standardize IT as design researchers, we can also provide the right EAM approach. So evaluation comes in from the outside. That could be just an exemplary evaluation. And this evaluation would lead to the most desirable pattern being blue, less desirable being red and green, and undesirable it would be to nothing at all. And based on this evaluation, which is basically comes from the stakeholders, it's included in the methodology, but it's not our decision to evaluate, at least in our understanding. So based on this external evaluation, we have clearly certain management approaches, which basically move up in the evaluation, from nothing to 50%, from 50% to 100%, for example. So based on the evaluation, we have kind of project types, classification of project types, and now the methodology should support these potential project types. So these are our 4 types of EAM projects that we should be able to support methodologically by an appropriate EAM construction approach. And now comes the more technical part of the design research, which means find a mechanism that efficiently supports these 4 types of EAM projects with a limited and minimal set of method fragments. And that construction works. That's basically the same that the car manufacturers do when finding a minimal set of components for building as much variance of car as possible. So at the end, we match these project types to the patterns, and we find out we can systematically compare. For example, if you want to move from red to blue, and you see the red shape here, and the blue shape, you exactly know what to do. You have to move up certain things from red to blue, so in terms of IT operation support, we have to increase maturity. And in terms of, business strategy support, you can a little bit reduce the maturity. So that we know exactly what to do to move from one pattern to another, because we know the patterns as well. So at the end we can relate, based on our analysis, the project types, the actual management activities, to message fragments, if you want to. Because we know so good how the patterns work. And therefore we are able to identify 6 fragments in this case. And these are minimal fragments because these 6 fragments do support all these 4 transformation types. C and D support this one, A and B this one, and so on and so on. And that's basically the anatomy of a situational method. But not a situational method for software development, but a situational method for the configuration of EAM projects according to the observed set of base solution patterns that we find in the real world. And that's our artifact. Configuration rules, patterns, a taxonomy of solutions, and together with evaluation, we are able to construct from this patterns, from this fragment set, a management artifact, a number of activities and their sequence to systematically help companies to move from one pattern to another. And we did this not only for EAM, but also for PPM, information management, for BPM, for information logistics, for IT alignment. So that's an approach that can be replicated for basically anything that is interesting for us. If you have sufficient observations to base your analysis on, if you have a structured way to obtain valuations, and if you are able to identify all these numbers in a way that is semantically useful in the real world. And of course, these artifacts have to be validated, so what we need to do is to try them in real cases and prove that they work, that they move the organization into the right direction, that somehow what we do relates to the desired goals that are the input, have been the input of our evaluation, for example. So that's our approach to construct artifacts, IS artifacts, by systematic design theory and experimentary theory grounded procedure that ensures a certain level of genericity. Now, we solve the goal. We have a means. It's generic, as long as the 119 cases that you've chosen are representative enough for the field. It's somewhat innovative, but that's probably a matter of discussion. Is this really innovative? Are we able to find completely new solutions by looking this much into existing solutions? Probably a topic for discussion. It's a little innovative because basically our set of requirements are not met by anything we found in literature, and we meet it. So at the end, we've done something new. Whether this method is really fit to do the big leaps forward in artifacts, we could discuss. Yes, it's grounded. Yes, it's transparent. Yes, it's iterative. And as long as we find companies that let us try doing it, we are able to most of the cases show that it creates use. So that's our approach. But I think I was mainly invited to talk about the groundedness, foundedness, and genericity of construction, although these are of course important aspects for service design. Now, on our way to extend this in the direction of service innovation and service design, the first aspect we started to address 4 or 5 years ago was this nice claim or this nice requirement that was, I think, initially articulated by Don Marchant at IMD, that many of the problems in IS practice can be related to the fact that design is often focusing on deployment and not on use. An example is that we know companies that created and produced and delivered more than 7,000 different reports per week within the company. And when we really were asked to find out how many of them were used, it was less than 20%. So we had more than 80% waste of development and production and operations resources in that company, and no one knew. No one knew. Because, well, both the management concepts, like IT demand and IT supply, differentiation, and the design concepts, they do not really consider how people use this stuff we design. And if you want to read a little bit of evidence there, I refer to this Marchant and Pepper paper, for example, and some presentations from Don Marchant, where he elaborates on this idea of we should design for use instead of deployment. Well, that's an easy claim, but how can we do that? So, for example, our first experience was to find a group of people that are so powerful matters whether they use the systems or not. And this group was CFOs. So with the support of these partners here, especially this one, we were able to do interviews in 30% of the top 250 companies in Europe. Complex interviews, which helped us to find out how these CFOs or CFO assistants, how they use corporate management systems. It was very interesting to find out that there are obviously, and we did it the same way like we look at highway intersections and at whatever. So we looked at the way that people use systems. And again, we found 4 different patterns. And again, what our usual suspects on what would have an influence on the usage were wrong. So usually, for example, for all this stuff, you would always assume that the size of the company and the industry are the most important design factors. And they never were. In all of our projects, they never were. The size doesn't matter and the industry doesn't matter. And here in this case, if I would ask you, what is the most important influence on the way a CFO uses the corporate management system? Now, I would say the first idea that we all would have is age. People like me would probably use a corporate management system differently than a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old. And that's not true also. Because what we see is that independent of age, independent of geography, independent of industry, independent of company size, well, we only looked at big companies, there are 4 working styles for senior managers, and these working styles have a main influence on the way they use the system. That is one influence, their working style. The second influence is whether they work for themselves, alone with the system, whether they present something for a large audience, like I do here, or whether they have a small team meeting. So that's what we call the use situation. And the third influencing factor was the device they had. So they have this kind of hybrid tablet notebook computer, whether they have a tablet, whether they have a smartphone, whether they have their desktop PC. So there are 3 design factors that were the most influential ones in our analysis for using CFO support systems. Working style, use situation, and device. And then we did the same thing, like with hyper intersections, with CFO systems. Designed configuration rules, designed modules, and an adaptable artifact that provides different navigation paths and different functionalities depending on your working style, your use situation, and the device you're using. And here's an example. It's the same system. It's an SAP product now. It's called Corporate Navigator. And the system looks differently and it behaves differently depending on what your working style is. We make a short